On the left over there, there's the templates policies and the teams policies. Don't get those confused. So let's say you're working through a presentation you're going to be doing, and you want to show how to hide a template, and you keep clicking teams policies instead of templates policies, and you can't find the hide button. Just hypothetically speaking.
Let's get going. It's February 21st, 2024, and the gang is all here today. We're well represented. And today's topic is the final in the templates for now. I say for now because, of course, who knows what will come next. But Teams templates is the topic of today. We'll regurgitate our what is a template slide, and then we'll talk about ways to template in Microsoft Teams. Todd's going to take us through the admin center. We're going to talk about out-of-the-box templates, copying existing teams and copying from an existing template. And I'll dabble a little bit in automation towards the end. So with that, Mark, tell us again for the final time for a while.
What is a template? A template, in the sense that we're using in this series, is it's sort of a predefined set of capabilities that you've bundled together. It's sort of a pattern, a mold. There are physical things in lots of professions that use templates, but we're talking about the starting point for something in the Microsoft 365 environment. We've talked about list templates, site templates. We're talking about team templates today. So it's just to give you a starting point that is consistent and predictable to get rolling.
And we have enough patterning.
Yeah. So why are templates good? Well, sometimes it may seem easier. Well, I'll just do the same thing over and over and over again. And there are only 4 steps. So I'm just going to write it down on a piece of paper and I'll just do those 4 steps over and over and over again. Well, you have to do it over and over and over again. And you have to make sure that you don't vary from those steps. So what templates give you is some repeatability. You're sure that it's going to be the same every time. You're sure that it's going to be consistently set up. The template can evolve based on what you've learned in your work, so that if you have a project template, for example, and you realize, what would really be a good idea is if we had this other list in our project template, then you can add that the next time you use the template that will be available. So the template should evolve with what your organization knows. They're usually a starting point. We don't tend to apply templates after the fact or after we've been working for a while. There are exceptions to that, but they really are intended to be starting points. And then if the template changes after you've used it to instantiate something, there isn't a connection to the template. In other words, the change to the template doesn't change all of the things you've generated from that template.
Awesome. Whoops. There we go. The button didn't press. Patrick, you have some hot off the presses info for us, and this is kind of interesting. We just heard about this. Yes.
Sorry, I was on mute.
Happens to all of us.
Yes, indeed. So for those of you who aren't aware, Microsoft rolled out Teams a new version, I guess about a year ago. And Teams V1 is set to retire at the end of March. So Classic Teams will retire on March 31st.
Of 2021 or 2024?
2024.
AI generated this slide. This wasn't us. That was, darn it, ChatGPT.
Oops.
So users will be automatically updated. Teams 2.0 has some issues with deep links that they are still working out. But I think the bigger issue there is, I know we have a client who hasn't made the leap yet, so we are working with them to make sure it happens so we all don't log in on April 1st and have a big old April Fools with Teams not working.
That's an interesting timing for that, isn't it?
So one would think if they've set a date, they also have it so that it'll work. But
I was I was looking at the post for this, and they said two things stuck out to me. Number one is that it doesn't affect teams in the VDI. So if you're using it in a VDI, it doesn't affect that. But the other thing was they didn't say anything about managed environments. So for folks that don't have admin privileges on their machines, I don't know what's going to automatically happen. Like, if you have admin rights, you're just going to go and it's going to update itself and it's going to run. But if you're in a managed environment, there really wasn't a good, answer for that. So we'll see what happens on April 1st.
Do we know, does Teams install itself into your personal directory like VS Code does, or does it install itself in a managed? Because like VS Code, you can install it. It installs itself into your personal directory, so you don't have to have admin for it.
Yeah, I haven't ever looked, so I don't know, but I'm sure you're going to go dig into that right now, Todd.
I can't because aren't I the next
You're on
slide?
Teams? Oh, well, good point. I suppose I'll let you talk. Damn it, I almost won.
Well, I was going to say that, you may start seeing some things pop up with like Teams version 1 not refreshing, or I've had some issues with some files where I've made changes and they don't save. So losing connection is happening quite often now. So it is very evident.
That just seems like Teams, though. That I can't think of any time I wouldn't have described Teams that way.
More so than usual, Todd.
Oh. Man, that's a high bar, low bar. I don't know.
All right. Well, I'll let Todd talk then. Todd, take us to the admin center.
So as you're all seeing this, you probably have two questions. The first is Todd's usually the encore at the end, not the warm up. I'm as surprised as the rest of you. Normally,
I clearly wasn't involved in the organization of this presentation.
I usually get the most important 17 seconds at the end of but today. So just kind of set the stage. Well, and I guess the other question is, why am I talking about the admin center and not PowerShell? And the problem is PowerShell just doesn't get a lot of love when it comes to Teams and to Teams templates. A couple of things, and Julie, you might get some PTSD for this, so I hope you're sitting down. The Teams PowerShell module has some stuff, but then there's some stuff that you have to do with Teams that came out of Communication Server. And so to manage Teams templates in PowerShell, you have to install the Communication Server PowerShell, which honest to God requires a reboot, and it requires finding a file name and then like this random file name that's 30 characters long and manually importing it. I mean, it's openly hostile. It's terrible. So there's really not a great PowerShell story. PNP doesn't handle it either, but we do have the admin center. So just kind of an overview. This is the Teams admin center. It lets you do all of the stuff for the entire tenant organization. You can't do a lot in here. It's fairly limited, fairly light. There's all the default templates, which we're going to talk about in a couple of slides. You can copy those, and that's really it. Like you can't, which is kind of annoying, but think of all the times in SharePoint people have gone in and edited default list libraries and things like that, and you have certain assumptions about how they're going to work, and then some somebody goes in and changes them. So with the templates in Teams, you can't change the default ones much, if at all. But what you can do is copy it and create custom templates. And then you have I was trying to think of a cool acronym like CRUD for the custom templates, but I couldn't come up with one. But you can create new ones. You can copy them back and forth. You can edit them, delete them, and all that kind of stuff. And then what the editing and deleting is like adding channels, adding apps, things like that. And then you have a Teams template policy, not to be confused with a Teams policy that you can use to hide templates from people, so you can make only certain templates exposed. Show me the next slide, please. So this is what that interface looks like. And really, I just wanted to show off my Snagit skills, which is why this slide is here. So this is what, if you've got the Teams template on the left selected, this is kind of what your interface looks like. You can see that the published by, the Microsoft ones are the default ones. The ones with my dev tenant in there, those are the ones that I created. And you can see that with the Microsoft one, you can't really do a whole lot with it. But once you get into the test ones, you can tweak them and do some stuff. And then if you click add, you can create one, green field, you can copy an existing one, things like that. On the left over there, there's the templates policies and the teams policies. Don't get those confused. So let's say you're working through a presentation you're going to be doing and you want to show how to hide a template and you keep clicking teams policies instead of templates policies and you can't find the hide button. Just hypothetically speaking. So make sure you get the templates policies, not the very similar looking teams policies. That's how you control who can see what.
Oh, ever the fodder for our intro snippet.
Next,
I like the way they use teams and team and templates. Those words are all sort of mucked around on that left side. Oh my God.
Hypothetically, I spent a really long time trying to figure out what I was doing wrong.
Derek,
Excellent.
You've done some work with the out-of-the-box templates. Help bring us back to reality.
Yeah, I have begrudgingly. I use them. I use them for a demo that I was doing for a conference, and they're basically SharePoint site templates that are specific to teams. Really, they provide that quick start for common scenarios like your help desk, your onboarding. I mean, you can see the list on the right hand side, but some of them are really like individual bespoke solutions, like how to manage a store or how to manage a bank branch. I don't know that I would be managing a bank branch with Teams, but there's a template for it. You can get so there's a whole host of Microsoft templates. You can also add your own. And very similarly, as we talked about site templates and list templates in another session, they're not really for enterprise use. They don't use enterprise content types. Once you go beyond that sort of one-off, there's really no way to start aggregating the data, no good way of starting to aggregate the data or do rollups or any of those common things that you may want to do on, say, your event site, your event teams or your project teams and those kinds of things. Now, I did want to point out, getting to this screen with all the different Teams templates is kind of buried in the Teams UI. You have to click the more create team options. And then it will open up this new interface.
I happened to be in a tenant where I was running Teams V1 in the browser, and so I realized today that when you used to start creating a team, it actually showed you the templates right up front. So like you got to know that there were templates. Now they're sort of hidden behind that link.
Yeah, and in Teams V1, the user interface was different depending on whether you were creating a team from the desktop versus when you were creating it from the web. And V2, now it's all the same. So I guess that's good.
Unless you want people to know that there are templates, right? I mean,
well,
it's sort of hidden that they even exist.
Exactly. So they went ahead and sort of hid it all in the UI, but they went ahead and built it. So the other thing that you can do is when you use one of these templates, you get to see all the apps that are installed in it. So you can see the project template has approvals and lists, and here are the lists it's going to create. Here are the different, it's going to add tasks and a planner to do, and it adds workflows. That's really awesome, but you can't add or remove any of these things before you create the site. So if you want a project, if you want a project template, but you don't want milestones, you can't delete that out right now. You can customize the channel names, but you can't remove them either. So you have to go in, you have to create them, and then you have to go in and then remove them. And while you see the list of things on the right-hand side under apps and in the general channels, the interesting thing there is that some things get created and some things don't. And I'm guessing under the covers, this has more to do with what needs delegated permissions versus what needs application permissions. But things like creating a planner task, you have to then go in and configure. Workflows, you have to go in and configure after the team has been created. But the issues list, the project tracker, those all get created as lists. And the views are all there and everything's there.
So interesting.
Yes.
All righty. So then we can copy an existing team, which is probably the most useful of all these things, I'm guessing.
Mark, did you want to do this one, or did you want me to?
Either way. So the way this works is you specify which team you'd like to copy from. So you're already on a team that works really nicely. Your option is to copy the selected team, and then you get an interface here that says, well, okay, well, what do you want to copy? And it's not that specific, but you can copy channels, you can copy tabs, you can just copy apps or not. You can check or uncheck the boxes depending on what's grayed out and what's not. So it's a nice way to sort of repeat your own work style from one place to another if you've got something that works pretty well. Like Derek said, you still have to set up a lot of the apps when you do this. It doesn't change that fact, and it's sort of like the old save site as template without content. Same idea here. You're getting the structure and the layout, but you're not getting the content that's in that existing team, which makes sense.
I would say that's more often than not what you'd want anyway, right?
It's not the thing is, if you're an individual Teams user and no one's sort of taken you through the fact that you can do this, you probably would never hit on it on your own.
Yeah, I can see that too.
Just create a team, and of course, a lot of organizations don't allow you to create your own team, so that's a whole different kettle of fish. But,
Right.
Yeah, the only thing, Julie, that go ahead.
I was just going to say, and it copies the SharePoint stuff in the SharePoint site it's related to, but maybe not other extra custom stuff.
No, it doesn't. So, like, if you created pages in the SharePoint site underneath it, it doesn't copy the pages.
That's what I expected. Yeah.
Yeah. Which arguably, if you have a repeatable project site and you have a intro about this project, and that's where you put your all the key information about the project, and maybe you pull some web parts in that aggregate data, like that's the kind of thing you do actually want replicated across the site. So
yeah, so just super limited functionality. Okay, so copy from an existing template then.
Yeah, so this is back to Todd's. I know it's Todd's Teams Admin Center, but I was in there mucking around too. So you can take the existing template. So I was looking at, I think it was Manage a Project, and you can basically clone it. There's even a duplicate button that sort of shortcuts it for you, and then you can change the channels and the apps and all of those things that you get installed. Now, one of the things I noticed when I was doing this is that I added a SharePoint page and a SharePoint app to the SharePoint pages and SharePoint app to one of the channels. And once I instantiated that team, they weren't there. Actually, I added them as tabs, and they weren't there. So I think some of them just don't happen, no matter what you do when you're configuring the template. So you're going to want to absolutely test your templates before you let anyone else use them, because what you get may not be what you've configured fully. Don't know how we'd figure out, other than experience, which ones sort of follow through and which ones don't. But some
another
of these,
good use case for a dev tenant that are harder to get now than
absolutely.
ever. But
Absolutely. And when you're testing this, you build a template and then you test it. I started doing this in our Simpraxis tenant, and then I realized, well, I'm creating Microsoft 365 groups. I don't want those. So then I went to my dev tenant, of course, where I should have started in the first place. So you definitely want to think about how to do this in a dev environment. I don't know about the portability of those templates, though. If you create them in a dev template and then want to use them in a production template, maybe somebody else has an idea about that one. I don't know.
I have some ways I could do it, but
I know Julie has some tools that
PowerShell?
let her do all kinds of things.
One thing I want to point out on both this and creating templates in the Teams Admin Center is that specifically the SharePoint Pages app and the website app. The website app is going away very soon, and the SharePoint app when you use it in a template, it doesn't let you configure it in the template. So it's just a blank app that you then have to go into the team and then configure. So.
Okay, moving along, copying from an existing group.
Yeah, so I added this because as I was going through the UI to in the team's admin, or sorry, when I was creating a new team, I realized that there was also a copy from existing group option. It's in the same place. It's not about templating though. This is the place in Teams where you can connect to a team site, as opposed to doing that thing that I've got in the second line there, which is in the SharePoint team site. You click that Add Microsoft Teams. It's the counter of that. I've never found it before. I've always wondered if you could do it. So I found it. I figured I'd add it to the slide deck.
Nice. All right. So then for laster but not leaster, automating configuration. Obviously, when we talked about site templates and such, and last week we definitely, or last week, 2 weeks ago, we definitely hit on Orchestry and ShareGate, which both have ways of automating the configuration of sites based on, in Orchestry's case, live SharePoint sites, and in ShareGate's case, also based on a live SharePoint site template. Orchestry also lets you create new team sites based on a live Teams template, where ShareGate's looks like it's a little bit more of a configuration thing as you go. But regardless, both of those third-party tools give you the ability to sort of automate and, without being a coder, create those templates on the fly based on live existing templates. From the perspective of software development, the Microsoft Graph has APIs to do this thing. And so unlike Todd's unfortunate experience with PowerShell, this is sort of all in the graph, all-in-one graph API. So as long as you could figure out how to get an auth token, which in and of itself can be a major hurdle, you can pretty much do everything that you saw in the UI. So you can create a team, or you can create a team from an existing group. Both have a template ID parameter so that you can say, I want to use this existing template. Now that could be a template that you created or an out-of-the-box template in the Teams Admin Center. So those templates can be then used. You can then update channels and modify any of the channel properties. You can update tabs and modify the configuration of any existing tabs. So unlike the provisioning experience through the UI, with the graph endpoints, you could actually make the connections that you need to make to have those tabs and channels and such all configured exactly the way you want to. And so this is obviously how Orchestry and ShareGate go about doing their provisioning. They're reading the configuration of an existing site and then they're basically re-enabling those same features and functionality and configurations in the destination site. So ways to automate it. You could, because the Graph APIs, you can do HTTP requests if you have licensing for Power Automate, so that you can do the HTTP request. You can use Power Automate. Logic Apps is the Azure equivalent of Power Automate. They're essentially identical. Power Automate just has a little bit of a different UI on top of it that simplifies things just a tiny bit, but quite honestly, Logic Apps is far superior as far as if you're going to do that kind of GUI workflow type thing. That Logic Apps is the better. Other ways: C#, Node.js, serverless, server-based automation, Azure Functions or the like, is another way that you can go about and have these functions. And so we were talking actually about before the call about adding buttons into lists or libraries. If you had all your provisioning in an Azure function, you could call that Azure function from a button in a list and away you go. So lots of ways to automate your templates. Todd, you may speak.
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So if you
want the last 17 seconds,
I want my coveted 17 seconds. So if there's a graph way to do anything, PNP PowerShell has the invoke PNP graph method. So if you can figure that out, and I say that So you talked about getting the tokens and all that. The PNP is a decent wrapper for that. When you do the get,
Yes,
connect PNP, it
sure.
figures some of that out for you. But then you can also work this in if you're doing any other, automation. You could use that same. And then for folks who are listening to me to use PowerShell to use the Graph Explorer to figure out what that phrase is, and there's a button there that shows you the PowerShell, and you can get it all from
Yeah,
there.
the documentation is ever improving. So there's the Graph Explorer, but if you need to read up on, what the caveats are or whatever, graph.microsoft.com is my go-to URL. It does redirect, but it's so easy to remember that I use it constantly. And that gives you the access to the Graph Explorer plus the API documentation. So that's the easiest way to get through that. All right, so resources, we have quite a few of them. Anybody want to highlight anything? Obviously, we have links to ShareGate and Orchestry because we are partners with both of those organizations. Great products, both slightly different use cases, but both basically great organizations. A link for our Teams Classic retirement that we talked about earlier. Some admin center information there.
I think
templates.
Just a little bit more plug for Orchestry and ShareGate. I think Microsoft, of course, always is shipping their org chart, right? So if you want to configure Teams and template it, you're mostly working in Teams. You're going to get a result that's Teams. If you want a SharePoint site, you're going to get something that's a SharePoint site. If you want to look across apps and services, I want to template something that has a team, Microsoft Teams, SharePoint site, planner, all that stuff together, bundled. That's where the third parties like Orchestry and ShareGate really start to shine, because they take that holistic view. Sorry to interrupt you, Julie, but I think that's really important. That all these point solutions from Microsoft do not add up to what those two companies are doing.
Excuse me. And and they're ever expanding their features and functionality. So, they're offering quite a bit. All right. So lastly, but not leastly, our next upcoming episode, March 6th, we're finally done with the template series. So we're going to move on to what does migration really mean? And I think our goal for that session is to sort of dig into what we, Praxis, think about when we talk about doing a migration, because a lot of people would come to us and be like, oh, we want to migrate some stuff. And that means a lot more than just lifting up your content from one location and moving and dropping it into SharePoint or Teams or whatever it might be. And so we thought we would dig a little into that and talk about what a migration is really. See us live. It is conference season. Man, is it all up. So we have North American Cloud and Collaboration Summit. That's in Dallas. I'm going to be there. That's in April 9th through 11th. We have discount codes all over this. So, please feel free to use those if you feel like going to one of these conferences. The Microsoft 365 Community Conference, that's in Orlando. That's the sort of the big conference that is happening. That's Derek and I will both be there delivering different sessions. The European Collaboration Summit, that's in Wiesbaden, Germany. Look at me go. Who thought I was going to actually pronounce that right? 0 people thought that. In Wiesbaden, and Derek and I will also be there to represent. And then TechCon 365 in Seattle, Derek is going to be there. So definitely check us out. If you can make it to one of those conferences, we'd love to say hi to you. And so that's all we have for this episode. We loved having you here for our template series. Please think about joining us live again March 6th for What Does Migration Really Mean? Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much for joining us this week on Ask Praxis. We love getting your questions or session ideas. You can submit by using the link in About. If you find this helpful, hit that like or subscribe button and share this content with your colleagues.